Night in the Woods. I've wanted to play this title for quite a while. I enjoy these type of, I don't want to say game, but that's not accurate, since a game would actually involve you playing it. This is more of an experience than a game you play. However, unlike other games in this genre, you do interact more than I expected with the environment, but more on that later. First off, I need to make a confession. I didn't actually play this on the Switch. Cheating on the Switch. My son owned this on his Steam account, and instead of spending another $20 on a game I already owned, I'm just using the PC version. And from what I read, everything's about the same. If this works out, maybe that's how I'm going to do a review of Yooka-Laylee. Thanks, Humble Monthly, for that copy. This is an adventure game, or a narrative-driven game. Whatever you want to call it, you play as a girl named May, a dropout from college who comes back to live in her small town. From there, she reconnects with all the friends she had, and slowly realizes that everyone else is growing up, but she is still standing still. This game reminds me of another game that I reviewed called Oxenfree, and honestly, I enjoyed that one more. It was shorter and scarier. This game tries to scare you occasionally, but it tends to drag out things longer than it should. And the more interesting parts of the story are the parts that just kind of go by fairly quickly. One of the more dragged out things that they do in this game is the dream sequences. When you go to sleep sometimes, you have to navigate a dreamlike area and activate a certain number of musicians. It was so dull. It took down the pacing of the game a lot. I know it's supposed to be a surreal and spooky experience, but after the fourth time, it got really repetitive and never challenging. Another thing that I didn't like was the main character herself. She was an asshole. There's nothing wrong with making a character who's morally wrong. I mean, Grand Theft Auto's been making millions doing this. However, they don't give us anything to make us like her. I know she's going through something, but as a playable character, she's just the worst. I love Greg, one of her friends. He was outgoing and fun to be around. But whenever she was around him, she dragged him down mentally, which was part of the story, but it was also frustrating to play. Leave my favorite character alone. I did like the way the story was written. It would sometimes be very amusing, but then it wouldn't be too afraid to get very dramatic. It towed the line between the two very well, and that's not easy to do. You travel through the town, which consisted of about 5 or 6 screens. It's nice that you could find little shortcuts like jumping on phone wires or going through a train station. They did change up the look of the town a lot, so the way that changed up over the days was actually kind of interesting to look at. And overall, I loved the art style this game had. It was very colorful. The story, unfortunately, is where I had the issues. And since this is a narrative adventure game, that is a problem. I like the side stories you can go on with your friends. It fleshed out their characters' motivations and relationships with your characters and the others around you. The problem is the main story has problems with the pacing. I'm not going to spoil anything past the second part. At least I hope I'm not going past the second part. Like, for example, you're going to go through your day when all of a sudden you find an arm. Let me preface this by saying that nothing up to this point would make you think a body part would factor in the story. It'd be like Mario jumping around all of a sudden in Mario Odyssey and finding a leg. It would change the game a lot and would give you a lot of questions. This was actually an interesting turn, but one that would take hours for it to be addressed again. But between that, it's going to band practice or hanging out with your friends. The horror part of this game gets dropped as quick as it's brought up, only to be brought back just as randomly. I was more interested in this arm storyline, and I was really frustrated with the lack of progression on that. Now, I have a lot of patience for narrative-driven games. If you've been reading my tweets in January and February, you know I was playing Legends of Heroes, and that is an endurance of slow gameplay. Over 100 hours of it, but it's worth it in the end. As for this game, is the trip worth the payoff? Yeah, for the friend story, but the main character story? Not really. There were little mini-games that you could play throughout the adventure. It could be as simple as spraying water on people or holding a flashlight, but there are more meaty ones like a dungeon crawler or a Guitar Hero type gameplay. There are also 2 side games for you to play, which were created to keep the Kickstarter backers who funded this game happy while they were making the game. Night in the Woods was a very pretty game, and it controlled fine. The story was a bit of a letdown. I did like it when it finally, and this is over 5 hours later, finally started kicking into gear. When the game embraced the scary part of this world, it was great. But the rest of the main story, I kind of found a little dull, with the exception of some of the side character stories. So sure, I would recommend this, but I think you should wait to find it on sale. It's currently at $20, and I would wait for it to come down another $5. It's not a bad game, it's just not one you're going to really want to replay, or at least one that I wouldn't. So I'd say just wait for it to go on sale.